Episode 302, Monbiot, Mansplaining and Urban Arrogance. This is the Change Underground. I'm your host, John Moore. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Well, folks, we've been through one of those first world problem situations in the last week. A large and very slow-moving high-pressure system sat off the west coast of Tasmania, funneling Antarctic air onto the state. A little bit of snow on the higher peaks 10 days ago or so, cooler temperatures and a little breeze reminded us winter was here. However, last weekend, the 11th and 12th of June, the weather system unloaded. 45 mils of rain in half a day, accompanied by increasing winds. They eventually topped out at 140 k's an hour, that's about 85 mile an hour, I believe. Now, Mrs. ChangeUnderground was staying in Launceston with her sister and brother-in-law, who had an early flight on the 12th. The night of the 11th was a true test of the structures at home. The power dropped out early, but was back up Saturday night until it wasn't again. Sunday, about 1 o'clock in the morning, some power came back. Enough for lights, TV and internet, but not enough for the fridge, the freezer, nor, importantly, the water pump. For 4 days we were basically camping indoors. Now some 22,000 houses lost power, and some still aren't reconnected yet due to the number of fallen trees. So we did get off quite lightly by comparison, but that's why last week's episode didn't happen. Now, it was my misfortune to catch George, I'm right, and everyone who disagrees with me is a simpleton Monbiot on the BBC's Start the Week programme, a revolution on food and farming from the 6th of June. Monbiot was on with two other guests, Sarah Langford and Claire Rattinan. Langford comes from a farming background. Despite her leaving to work as a barrister, she returned to the way of life. A hands-on perspective to the title of the episode. And Rattinan is a writer and food gardener, again with the hands-on experience. Now, the thrust of the program was to reconnect eaters, that is, people, with food producers and pay the producers a decent return for good food and sequester carbon through regenerative techniques. Monbiot followed the corporate line. Bio-vat meat, GMO vegetables in glasshouses, shut down most farms and returned the land to nature. And how could you argue with the man, as he told us he'd read 5,000 peer-reviewed articles? Go vegan and end livestock farming and turn every farm that's left into hydroponic lettuce factories. I exaggerate for effect, but not that much. It turns out the other guests had read the self-same journal articles and come to different views. Funny how that works. This is not the first time I've encountered G. Monbiot. Back in episode 158, Cows Aren't the Enemy and Let's Reward Those Doing the Job, 4th of October 2019, I had to face the all cows are bad attitude from this individual. Now, there may be some truth in what he's saying, particularly industrial cattle production. I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you too are appalled at the CAFO system of feedlots and battery hen establishments and piggeries run along the same factory farm logos. And yet the good George simply lumps all livestock production under the industrial banner without considering the alternatives that actually encourage biodiversity. The rotation of stock, the replanting, or even just the planting of hedgerows, the addition of a canopy of trees to also feed the livestock, whilst providing habitats for insects and birds and lizards and so on. This idea of a living countryside with food production and biodiversity working hand in glove is not only possible, but actually happening as I speak. This notion was dismissed as food for the middle classes, that is, organic food. Once we take the full cost of chemical farming into account, though, the food price is considerably higher than that faced at the supermarket. The rising cancers, the obesity epidemic in the developed and increasingly the developing world, the contamination of waterways, soils and urban areas with long-lasting systemic carcinogenic chemicals. And once these are factored into the true cost of chemically produced food, they place it at far more expensive than organic. And that extra cost, of course, is disproportionately placed upon the working classes of the world, because the price is paid through health systems, early deaths, water pollution and so on, lots of chronic disease. Now these are accounted for in different departments from the Department of Agriculture, or Food, Forestry, Farming and Fishing as this department is sometimes called, in some places around the world. So we have an industry, industrial food, that creates disease through processed foods at huge profits and socialises the side effects, health, pollution and so on, to the taxpayer. Nice lurk if you can work it. Then we have the apologists for the system, the Monbiots, the economists, the lobbyists and so forth, flooding the media with this is the only way to feed the world nonsense. And of course this is the only way we can fight climate change. And most people just accept that as truth because they have no direct connection with food or farming or fishing or forestry. The urbanisation of the species has disconnected so many of us from the realities of nature, from food production options and from the sheer riotous wonder of life, that we are in extreme danger of battery henning our species for in a misguided attempt to save the planet. Be alert to the media coming at you. Question critically everything, including this little podcast. Oh, and on that matter, thanks Nick for the Facebook message. I really appreciate the feedback and get a thrill to hear people are enjoying what I've been sending out onto the interwebs. Again, think critically. Respond where you can to obvious falsehoods, misdirected good intentions and downright lies. Also plant some food and share some if you have an excess. Flavour and kindness are, I'm beginning to believe, our two greatest weapons in the fight against disinformation and for climate action. So let's be kind and grow some food. It's that simple. If you'd like help to grow food, the discount's still on with the no-dig gardening course over at World Organic News. So normally $149, now selling for $17, and it'll stay at that price until the world returns to a little bit more normality. So if you've been put off in the past, now's the time to jump in and learn. If you know anyone who would be interested, and the more people we can get growing the better, let them know please. I really would appreciate it. There's a link in the show notes, or you can just go to worldorganicnews.com. There's a tab there. The best time to move from consumption to production was probably 50 years ago. The second best time is definitely now. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Thank you all for listening. I'll be back next week.